A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Virtus Fertility Centre, Singapore's public seminar, and thank you so much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. My name is Stephanie, your MC for today. Okay, just some house rules before we really start. So, in accordance to the rules and regulations due to COVID-19, please ensure that your mask is worn at all times during the seminar, and no intermingling is allowed. Please set your phone to silent mode in order to make this seminar as conducive as possible. The seminar is currently live streamed on our Facebook page for interested couples or individuals who are unable to physically join us at this event today. And also, we have got some coffee and tea right smack at the back, at the corner. So feel free to help yourselves, but do not crowd around. All right. So we have with us three highly experienced professionals who will be sharing useful information with all of you today. Panel Q&A will ensue at the end of the third presentation. So for any burning questions that you may have, please feel free to share them during the panel Q&A session, and our presenters will address as many of them as possible. So without further ado, I shall invite our first presenter of the day, Ms. Sharon Lim, fertility coach and counselor, who will be sharing with you on building emotional resilience for the fertility journey. Ms. Sharon, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon Lim, as you can see. So this is the first time I'm doing a presentation with a mask on, and I'm also not used to mic. So please, if you can't understand me, or if I'm too loud or too soft, please let me know. Okay. So just to start, one of the things that's very unique about Virtus is that we have a team of coaches. I'm one of them. I'm one of the senior ones. And every couple who comes to Virtus as part of your intake program has a session with one of us. And I'll explain towards the end of my presentation what the touch points are for couples who choose to do their IVF at Virtus. But basically, bottom line is I see myself as one of the team at Virtus and kind of like a cheerleader for you, because we know that it can be quite a tough journey. And in fact, some of us counselors have also had our own IVF journeys as well, so we can certainly empathize. So, my assumption, I might be wrong, but my assumption is that you guys are here because you're either trying to build a family or want to add to your family, right? Some of you might have been doing it for 6 months, some of you might have been on the journey for years, some of you might have never done IVF before, and some of you may have tried elsewhere and decided that you wanted a fresh start, which is always a good thing. But so anyway, just let me get on with this. So, very brief agenda. Something how much time do I have? Probably won't need that long. But so I just want to, just so that you know that you're not weird or abnormal in any way. I just want to kind of share with you a few of the things that other couples have shared with me about what really stresses them out about having to consider or to do IVF, right? As a kind of educational thing, some of you might have medical or biological backgrounds, but I think it's also important for life, not just for the fertility journey, how stress affects us, right? How does stress affect us in positive as well as negative ways? Because that has some bearing on how healthily and how calmly you're able to start or continue on your fertility journey. Because it does require quite a lot of stamina and also resilience. Now, we always hear the word resilience, right? We tell kids, some of us will have kids, this is how you should be resilient. Your bosses might say to you at work, toughen up, right? You just need to be resilient. There's actually a huge and long body of psychological work behind what resilience is and how we can build it. So it's almost like a skill, right? We're all born with slightly different degrees of foundational resilience, but like empathy, resilience is something that can be cultivated, almost like going to the gym every week. I'll just share with you some very kind of, again, tips, for times, whether it's to do with this or work or road rage or the MRT is too crowded. Just kind of emergency tips that might be able to help you in the moment to just kind of calm down and decide, actually, is this something I need to get worked out about, or shall I just save my energy for something else? And then, finally, just one slide again, just to show you exactly where us as coaches kind of touch you if you come to London, so you can kind of fit us into the overall picture by the end of this afternoon. So, what are some of the things that people tell me? When they come to me and they've been trying to build their families for quite a while. What gives them stress, right? And you can run down this list. You might feel or experience some of this, none of this, all of it. I don't know. But certainly, I think one of the most difficult things about trying to start a family and trying every month with or without a doctor's help is, just don't know what's going to happen this month. Right? Whatever I do, I actually don't know until I do the pregnancy test whether I'm going to get pregnant this month. So the sense of like, no matter what I do, I just can't control the outcome. And for some of us, it could be the first time in your life, right? When you actually feel like whatever you do, fate is somehow against you, right? And actually, you can come away with the sense of life is just so unfair. Well, the bottom line is that life is not inherently unfair. It just is. Some of us, are very lucky and we can easily just drop babies right, left, and center. The rest of us have to try a little bit harder. And actually, the last time I checked in the developed world, I think something like 8% of all babies born were conceived through IVF. That's actually quite a lot. If you go and look on the MOH website, you will see that the number of IVF cycles that are done in Singapore every year has been going up and up and up and up and up. So, people are starting to seek medical help earlier and more frequently, which is a good thing. Sometimes you just need to do it. We can all build. Yeah. Nowadays, worldwide, we build our families in all kinds of ways just because we can. So, if this is something you're considering, if your doctor says to you, maybe this is something that you should do, so be it, right? If you want to have a healthy baby, so be it. Give it a shot. So it is, for that same reason, an emotional roller coaster. When we're in a stressful situation, usually at some point, that situation will end. Or usually at some point, you have some control over it. So, for example, if you're in a really bad job, you've got a bullying boss or something, and life is really terrible at work, you can make a decision. Do I stay and try and change what I can, or do I actually leave? Right? You kind of have some kind of choice, which is not always easy, but you have some kind of choice. With this, if you're committed to trying to get pregnant every month and you're trying, you kind of get your hopes up and then you get disappointed. You get your hopes up, you get disappointed. Not every month. And that is incredibly exhausting and disheartening at times. And this is why this idea of having stamina, resilience, keeping the goal in mind, not quite knowing when you might achieve that goal, that is a hard thing to do, but it's a possible thing. And that's where our coaching team kind of help you. Cheerlead you along and kick you on the butt and, just kind of give you tips to help you with that. Some of you might know why you have a fertility block, and others have this infamous unexplained infertility, right? Those situations cause stress to people. You have an issue, say maybe your sperm quality is very bad. You kind of go, why me? Why can't I be like the other guy? But by the same flow, if you have no reason at all, it's the same. Why me? Life is unfair. Why is this happening to me? So it's all a question of perspective, right? And your own experience. A lot of women, these next 4 points, go onto Google and spend too much time on Google looking at all kinds of experiences and data and research. You know what? I think it's very stressful. 90% of what you read on Google is rubbish, right? And probably doesn't apply to you. And also remember that, if you read blogs from women who are having fertility challenges, write about these things tend to be the unhappy ones, right? They tend to be the unhappy ones. My doctor had a lot of pain, no matter what I did. It's more like venting. So if you spend all your time on Google rather than talking to a team or doctors who are really going to know you inside out, you're going to get a very biased view. You're going to get a very biased view about how IVF actually is and what it can and can't do. Right? So that's important. So I usually encourage the couples I work with to maybe stay away. I understand why you do it. It's because your brain's looking for an answer. You're always looking for an answer. That's what our brains do. Our brains hate uncertainty. They want a firm answer. They want to know every month what that pregnancy test is going to be, and until you get it, your brain just goes round and round in this kind of storm of anxiety, right, and frustration. That's normal. That's what our brains do. So the question is, how do we not let that overpower us? Some of it is not overexposing yourself to the wrong stuff, right? Absorbing other people's grief, absorbing other people's frustrations, taking away the wrong idea about what IVF can and can't do, when you should go for it, when you shouldn't go for it. Women tell me all the time, there's this thing about unfairness and why me, right? There's a lot of sadness with some women when they see other pregnant women, or they see, friends having lots of children seemingly very easily. I tell you, you never really know what someone's story is unless you sit down with them and talk to them about it. And unfortunately, in Singapore, infertility is still something that we don't really talk about for a lot of reasons. So, I'm really glad that you guys are here. And I acknowledge, for some of you, I think it takes quite a lot of courage to turn up here today and sit in a room with other couples who might be facing the same challenges as you, right? But I'm glad you're here. This pressure, right? Family pressure. I want to be a filial son or filial daughter. I want to give my parents grandchildren. That's huge in Asia. I mean, that's really huge in Asia. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it does add pressure. Come Chinese New Year, the aunties start asking you all kinds of difficult questions at family gatherings, right? How do I respond to that? How do I predict, anticipate those questions? What's our answer going to be? How do I keep people distant if I'm not ready to discuss this? And you shouldn't have to discuss it with everybody. And clearly, it's a lonely journey. It can be a lonely journey. If you don't know anyone else who's been through IVF, if you don't know anybody else who's experienced what you're experiencing, another reason you go into Google, right? To feel like you're not alone and to try and figure out what other people are doing. And I tell you, I always say to couples when they come to Virtus and my first session with them, I always say to them, if you want to know anything that other couples have done in this situation, I'm very happy to share with you, anonymously, of course. But yeah, I'm always happy to say, this couple did this and it helped or it didn't help and so forth. And clearly, if you've been on this fertility journey for quite a long time, sometimes you lose track of the goal, right? You might have different expectations, different desires. Do we start IVF now or don't we? What shall we do at every step of this huge project that is IVF? So I try to remind people at the worst time sometimes that you as couples are a team. You work on the assumption that both of you want a child equally, and you start from there. That's not always the case, but it's good to just kind of get it out and discuss it and keep doing these kind of milestone checks very often and say, you still want to do this, and so forth. So, and especially for the women, the conflict with work, right? So many of us work nowadays, and when they first come to us, if they've never done IVF before, women are very concerned about work. Like, do I tell my colleagues? Do I not tell my colleagues? How do I take time off work? How much time off work do I need? Do I need to take time out after any surgery and so forth? So those are the kind of things I cover. So as coaches at Virtus, we cover, how do I manage the stress and anxiety? We kind of understand it. We also cover very practical things about the process, the timelines. how to plan for it, what do you say to people, what do you not say to people, and how little white lies you might have to tell at work in order to get time off to turn up at the doctor's clinic, right? So these are things on an individual basis we sit down and talk to people about. So little 101 on stress. So this slide was supposed to be a bill, but we just transferred to our new branded template. It's not a bill, so it looks a bit complicated, but I'll try and talk you through it. So first of all, I want you to understand that there's good stress and there's bad stress, right? Stress keeps us alive. Our bodies experience stress because we are still cavemen, right? Physiologically, we haven't evolved much from caveman days. So if you're out in the bush and a lion comes charging out of the bushes, you don't want to stop and think, right? Your instinct just kicks in and you either stand your ground and fight or you run away. If you're like me, you're like an ostrich, you stick your head in the ground or you play dead. And when I get period pain, right? When I have a lot of pain, I faint, right? So that's like the old physiological response of playing dead, which some animals still do. But it's the kind of stress that gets us out of bed in the morning, gets us to meet our work deadlines, etc., etc. So that's good stress, short-term stress. And what happens when you have a stressful event is your body's incredible kind of sympathetic adrenaline system kicks in, right? It rushes blood to your muscles, away from your gut, to all the places that it's needed for you to fight or run away. So we get a rush of adrenaline and other stress hormones. Our blood pressure goes up because we're getting ready to fight and just kind of get all our power out. And of course, our heart rate goes up, right, to try and keep the blood flowing around. And that's all fine. And then when the stress is over, you're kind of back to your resting baseline again. So good stress. However, a lot of us in Singapore live under long-term stress conditions. Right, we don't sleep enough. We've got really difficult jobs. We're juggling a lot of things, or maybe we've got bad relationships that are stressing us out, etc., etc. Chronic stress is a killer, right? We are not meant to live in those kind of conditions, right? Your body physiology actually changes. So the first things you'll notice. So if I take sleep deprivation as an example. One of the first things you'll notice that you become more irritable, right? You become more irritable, you lose your temper, you lose focus, harder to concentrate at work, and then you start to get health problems, insomnia, aches and pains, headaches, and so forth. Well, let me tell you, people who suffer chronic stress also die younger, right? They're more at risk of diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, obesity, right? So we are not meant to live under those conditions. And I bring this up because some of the couples that I see find the fertility journey itself chronically stressful. That's not going to help your IVF, right? So that's why we have that's one of the key reasons we have a team of coaches and counselors at Ventures, because we want to try and get you into the best frame of mind and physically and psychologically as possible, so that you can embark on your IVF as healthily as possible, right? That's a part that you would play, right? Doctor does his part, embryologist does his part. You guys also need to do your part, and after all, it would be your project trying to have a child. Okay, so I like to think that we're an important part of the team at Virgins. I hope so, but you can ask the others later on if that's true. So what is how do you manage this, right? So if you know that you're in that state of being and you know it's not good, whatever the reason, whether it's work or something else, and you can't change the circumstances that you're in, which is very hard, well, then I know it's very hard, but the key is that you actually may have to find time to balance it out, right? So our bodies work on this idea of balance. Stress hormones go up, you need to find a way to bring it down. Stress hormones go up, you need to find a way to bring it down. Our brains don't actually care why we're stressed. Our brains just think a lion is rushing out at us from the trees, right? So how you manage it, your brain also doesn't care. right? So it's really this rather than this. So balance is what I'm looking for in couples who go through IVF in every way. This is not a time to start some crazy diet or to suddenly decide I'm going from couch potato to running 10K a day, right? This is not the time to start doing that. It's time to find a healthy balance somewhere and actively manage any stressful or anxiety feelings that you have. And that's how you keep your body. So, well-being is emotional, physical, and psychological. Okay, but resilience is a huge part of managing stress. It's foundational. But what is resilience? You ask different people. Resilience, basically, for me, is it's not how many times you fail; it's how many times you can get up and get up well, right? It's coming back for more and more and more and more. And it's the ability to bounce back from a stressful situation or a difficulty or a disappointment over and over again. And that is resilience. There are some psychological ways to build your own resilience, which are quite surprising, actually. And this comes from psychological research as well. Have a look at this list. You might find it quite surprising. Again, it's got nothing to do with whatever's causing you the stress, but we know that if people do these things, they're somehow more resilient. They've got more of a buffer, their foundation is a bit stronger, they're more able to take insults, and they're more able to recover quickly from, whatever it might be, bereavement, a job loss, a country move, a fertility journey, illness, right? So the first thing is this reframing, right? This reframing of how you might see your situation. Believe that you can cope. Right? Believe in your own toughness. Believe that if you have a major disappointment, you will pick yourself up and decide what the next step is going to be. Right? So very resilient people are able to do this. Like, I'm just going to live one day at a time. And whatever happens, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how it affects me, I know deep in my heart that I'll be okay. I will cope. I'll find a way to cope. It may happen very quickly. It may take a long time, right? So that's what that means. Number two, stay connected with sources of support. I don't mean support groups for infertility. I mean your friends, your hobbies, things that you like to do, people who make you feel good. So just general, for some of you might be church or something else, but we all have what I call a secure basis. Hobbies, people, things that make us feel secure, that make us know who we are. A lot of couples, when they go down the rabbit hole of IVF and infertility, they start to isolate themselves. And that's not healthy, right? You gotta remember that life is a huge stage and there are many, many, many things on it, from job to hobbies to friends to horrible tasks you have to do with family, etc., etc. And sometimes when you're feeling very bad, all the lights on the stage go dark, right? And the spotlight is just on your fertility. And you kind of go down that rabbit hole. You have to raise the lights. You have to raise the stage lights and remember all those other things, all your other obligations, all the other things that keep you strong, all the things that make you feel secure, and attend to those, right? So that's what I mean by staying connected. Know what makes you feel good and make sure that you stay connected with those, regardless of how difficult your fertility journey is. If you're lucky enough to have someone or a couple of people that you can talk to about your infertility journey, that's helpful, right? Someone that you trust, someone who's not going to judge you, maybe someone who even understands and just helps you to feel strong. That one's an obvious one. This one is very interesting. Be helpful to others. Be helpful to others. There's a professor called Laurie Santos at Yale University. I don't know if you've done her course. It's free on Coursera at the moment. It's called The Science of Happiness. And she looked at things that make people happy. And it's not, funnily enough, it's not like how big my car is or how much money I have or what my job title is, because once you get something, you always want more, right? Or there's someone else who has more than you. The two things that she found really drive happiness are one, experiences, good experiences. So people who spend their money on holidays, for example, rather than a nice handbag. Um, and the other one is giving, right? There's something about giving that makes us feel really good about ourselves. Um, so being helpful to others, I think what it does is, one, it feels good, right? You can give yourself a pat on the back. But also, I think there's something about thinking about other people that gets you out of your own head, right? It helps you to raise the lights on your stage. It helps to remind you that life is about more than just yourself or your fertility journey. So that's a kind of a nice balance to try and stop you from kind of going down that rabbit hole. Activate positive emotion, right? So don't watch Donald Trump on the news all the time because it's just really miserable and irritating. Watch Queer Eye, I don't know if you guys have seen that, but the people on that program are so nice and so human and so helpful, right? Watch, don't expose yourself to just unhappy stories on Google about women who can't get pregnant or hated their doctor. Expose yourself to happy things as well. Go see a Disney movie or something, or nice music, or go to a disco, right? So again, balance, right? With all the bad things that happen in the world, please make sure that you have a balanced view. Because when you're stressed or anxious, we tend to become very unilateral. We tend to only look for bad things. I mean, that's what our brain says, right? The brain always says, oh, yeah, it rained today. It never says, oh, it's a nice sunny day, I'm so lucky. Never, never. Because your brain's trying to protect you from unpleasant things. So you need to actively keep your brain balanced all the time. That's why counselors always tell you, oh, go write a gratitude journal. It sounds really banal, but the purpose of writing a gratitude journal is to train your brain to also look for good things. I once went through a very difficult time in my life, and I was trying to write a gratitude journal. And there was one day, the only thing I could think of to write was, I'm really glad it didn't rain when I was at the bus stop today. Right? so that's an example. So active, find opportunities to do things that make you feel positive, basically. This cultivate and active survival. It's a little bit like number one, right? You'll be, whatever happens, you're going to be around, and you're going to cook, and you're going to have a life. Okay. Well, seeking meaning, that's a bit more difficult, I think, to apply the fertility journey in some sense. But, some people do. Some people find a meaning in their current position, right? Maybe there's some kind of reason or meaning about your challenges, and maybe you can take something from it. I think people who have religion probably find that a little bit easier, but we do find ways to make ourselves, I kind of feel like we're on this planet, right, for whatever reason. Okay, there are physical things you can do. So those are kind of like the psychological reframing things to do, train your brain to be more balanced. But body and mind, which comes first, doesn't really matter. We have something called the neuroendocrine system in our body, brain and hormones. They are so interconnected. They are inseparable, right? So if someone was very, very depressed, had clinical depression, and was seeing a psychiatrist, the psychiatrist would tell that person, in addition to your drugs, you need to go out for a 20-minute run every day. 20 minutes of running every day is as good as an antidepressant for treating mild depression, right? It's that activation of your body's positive hormones. So never ever think that any emotional stress you have can't also be partially or fully addressed by the way you take care of yourselves. They are totally intertwined. Mind or body, which comes first, doesn't matter. These are the building blocks, physical building blocks of resilience. Sleep is probably the most important one. So Singapore, it turns out, is the most sleep-deprived nation in the world. People have reported, on average, that they sleep here for 6.5 hours every night, which I promise you will lead to chronic stress, dementia, heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, right? The human brain actually has a very, very, what we call narrow therapeutic window as far as sleep is concerned. We need somewhere between 7.5 to 8.5 hours sleep every night to go through our full 4 or 5 cycles. Unfortunately, I'm sure some of you are sleep deprived. I can tell just by looking at your faces, right? We forget what it was like not to be sleep deprived. Okay, we forget. I mean, the last time you're not sleep deprived might have been the last time we were able to go for a 3-week holiday, right? And sometime in the middle of the second week, you caught up with your sleep, and suddenly, oh, the world is so much brighter, and my brain is so much more focused, and I have so much more energy, and I'm not shouting at my wife or husband all the time. So very easy when you're stressed or busy to put sleep at the bottom of your important list of things to do. Actually, I think it should be number one. And I think there is almost always a way to find an extra half an hour of sleep a night. You know, sometimes you may have to stay up late 1 or 2 nights, but in general terms, chronic sleep deprivation leads to exactly the same effects as chronic stress. So during the day, what happens is, you know, in Alzheimer's, I don't know if you know, there's a toxin called beta amyloid that builds up in the brain in Alzheimer's. So what happens during the day is beta amyloid slowly builds up in your brain. It's like a toxin. And during sleep, it's washed away. So the next morning, you're starting with a clean slate again. And that length of time, what's that operational period of time we can function? It's about 16 hours from the research, right? So you got to think about toxin building up during the day, sleep, wash it out. Toxin building up the day, sleep, washing out. So we think that's one reason why sleep deprivation leads to Alzheimer's disease. So sleep is important, but like I said, you know, it'll normalize the way your body handles glucose and therefore insulin and cortisol and all the stress hormones as well as your cholesterol, etc., etc. Exercise the same, right? What's the best form of exercise? Probably walking, probably brisk walking. We have evolved to walk. Okay, so back to the caveman thing again. We used to track animals for days, walk 10, 20 miles a day, and then maybe only eat once or twice a week, right? Most of us probably eat too much now anyway. But walking is great. So walk everywhere, right? So when you start IVF or you start fertility treatment, we tend to forget actually that pregnancy is not an illness. And, you know, we get a little bit scared, a little bit protective, or mustn't do this, mustn't do that, must lie in this position. You know, all nonsense, right? So I think, you know, your body is made to do this. So keep moving, do some exercise, and, you know, I'm sure Dr. Liao later will confirm, you know, we've seen amazing things happen with men's sperm quality, right? With just a few weeks of good sleep and exercise and eating well. So eat well. Eat well. You have to fool Mother Nature into believing that life is good. You have to literally fool Mother Nature into thinking, oh, this woman is well nourished. She's not about to die at the end of a gun in the Yemen somewhere. She can feed a fetus in her body and she can keep a baby alive when it's born. Right? So, I mean, it makes evolutionary sense. And there's other stuff, there's some of the stuff I referred to already about, you know, that mind-body connection, keeping your mind as balanced as possible. So, you know, always be aware that your brain will always go towards the negative because that's what it's evolved to do. So you have to work harder to maintain a balanced perspective on the world. Okay, so this is resilience. I'm not going to say to you, don't feel stressed, don't feel anxious, because that would be unnatural. You know, stress and anxiety are part of the IVF journey. It's part of the IVF. It's part of life. It's what makes us rich humans. It's what keeps us alive. It's just when it's misapplied or maladaptive, then it becomes dangerous. And this is how you build your resilience to stress. So, you know, you have to ask yourself, are you spending most of your time in your stressful emergency room, losing your temper with everyone all the time, getting short-tempered, can't sleep, irritable, can't focus? And how much time are you then spending in what I call your healing room to balance out the stressful effects of 21st century living, right, as well as your IVF journey? So, you know, this is a very graphic, to me, of how you keep your balance. Accept that life is stressful, accept the IVF journey is stressful, but manage it. Manage it. Don't deprioritize sleep, diet, and exercise. Right? Don't deprioritize your 1 or 2 good friends who make you feel really great when you go out and have lunch with them. Right? You can always find that 10, 15 minutes to go for a walk after dinner. You can always find that extra 15 minutes of lying in bed. And so my husband always says to me, sometimes I sit on the couch and I go, oh, I meant to go for a 30-minute run, but, now I only have 10 minutes left. I'm not going to do it. And he always says, look, 10 minutes is better than nothing, which is true. Absolutely true. So, couple of tips. If you're in an emergency situation, right, if you suddenly feel your mind spinning out of control, if you're really miserable, maybe you want to cry, 1 minute, okay, you get really obsessed about something, or if you're like my husband, someone cuts in front of you on the road and you suddenly gets road rage, and then you see his face turning red, and then suddenly the steering wheel goes like this, and I get really scared, right? Breathe, breathe. That phrenic nerve, that connection between our diaphragm and our hypothalamus and our brain, that is the only physical anti-stress signal that our brains recognize. So a couple of deep breaths, resets your brain, try it, right? And then you can go like this and decide, okay, is it worth chasing that guy down the road, maybe killing my kids in the car, right? So it gives you a slightly, it's just an emergency maneuver. Breathing is great. Breathe properly, deep breath, relax your tummy muscles. You think about your diaphragm moving up and down here. That's what you need to do. Not like this, right? Which is what stress people do all the time. The second thing I say, I already said I'm never going to tell you to not feel anxious because it's not helpful. But what I can teach you to do if I spend time with you is how to make room for anxiety, right? You can kind of make some room for it, hold it a little bit lightly, so it's still there, but you can still do what you need to do despite that feeling of discomfort, right? That's what very resilient people are able to do, and we can teach you how to do that. And with a little bit of practice, it's like anything else. It's like training your biceps. It gets easier and easier. And then finally, just a few things. Have a positive communication strategy. Right, already mentioned for some of us, Chinese New Year is a very stressful time. Or your bosses or your work colleagues will say, hey, where'd you go? You disappeared. You didn't come into work on that Friday morning. You know what the questions are going to be. You know what some of those questions are going to be. Just be ready for them. Right, decide between the two of you what your reply is going to be, and then that's the end of it, right? And then just cut them off. And it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't have to be the truth, right? This is your business, it's nobody else's business. So you can tell little white lies, Some women say, oh yeah, I know they thought I had appendicitis, so I had to go into casualty, and took the whole day I was stuck there, right? Whatever, right? Just make up whatever you want. Okay, and I think we kind of covered most of that. So know what stresses you, do something about it, maintain your balance by spending more time in healing. If you're aware when you're stressed, that's a start, number one. Number two, doing something about it. We talked about how you should build and maintain resilience. Communication between the two of you is absolutely key. Milestones, agreements, you still want to do this together, what's the right thing to do, etc., etc. And absolutely rehearse your mind for success, right? Nobody starts a race thinking they're not going to cross the finishing line. IVF is the same, right? Please don't start thinking, oh, I'm going to fail already. This is a last resort. See a lot of couples like that. It's not a last resort. You're here, and we're hoping we can help you, right? And some couples are very lucky, first ever transfer to get pregnant. Others take a little bit longer, right? And that's where the stamina and resilience comes in. Question of resources, right? It's basically stamina and money, basically. So I'm absolutely frank about it. So at Virtus, these are the standing touch points that we have with you. So when you come to Virtus for the first time, before you start IVF, and the doctor and Dr. Liao goes through the actual medical process of IVF with you after I'm done. But I spent a lot of time, especially with couples who've never had an IVF before, to just kind of talk about the process, because I think knowledge is power. If you know what to expect, it's less scary. Right, so we talk about the process, what actually happens, is it painful, not painful, how do you actually do this, how do you actually do the injections, how much time do I need to take off work, maybe some people want to discuss with me what I tell my boss, and I also talk about some of these lifestyle factors, right, what should you eat, what should or shouldn't you do that may or may not help, and often the husbands feel a little bit guilty because with IVF, the women bear the physical brunt of IVF. So sometimes the husbands want to know how to help, right? So So we can talk about that. And I hope at Virtus we're not like some other IVF centers that make the men feel just like sperm donors and nothing else, right? So, we very much feel that this is a team thing and we both want the child equally. Start with that assumption. The second touch point is when the woman, the wife, comes back for the embryo transfer, right? So you got a stash of embryos tucked away in our embryology lab, and you're ready to see if you can get pregnant with the embryo transfer. We see you preferably just before the embryo transfer to get you relaxed for the procedure and talk about that 2-week waiting time. You have your embryo transfer, then you have to wait 2 weeks for a pregnancy test to see whether the embryo is implanted and is growing or not. That psychologically is the most stressful time for women in the whole IVF process. Most women will say that, that anticipation, that waiting, they get very conjunced. I want to run to Guardian and buy a pregnancy test kit, every day. So we talk about how do I manage that, right? So get a little bit deeper about managing anxiety in a healthy way. So whether you only need to come for one embryo transfer, or you might need to come back for more, if you want, one of us will sit down with you before everyone, and with someone you can call during that time if things get too conjunced for you. Okay, so that's it. That's our roles at Virtus. I hope that's helpful, and ask me any questions you want later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for the very, very meaningful sharing. I hope all of you have learned some valuable tips from her. All right, next up, let us invite Dr. Liao Sui Lian, Scientific Director of Virtus Fertility Center Singapore, who will be sharing with you on the R in IVF. Dr. Liao, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, thank you for coming to attend our first session for the year. And also, we hope that we can share things with you. And also, hopefully, what I'm going to present would answer some of the answers that you have been looking for. Now, my topic here is basically, the ART in IVF. ART means assisted reproductive techniques, yeah? So it's something like an art too. Now, wait, can I? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. Everyone knows what is fertilization. Fertilization means the union between an egg and the sperm. It seems very easy, yeah? But to get the sperm to fertilize the egg, now what I'm going to show you here, this is on this slide here. This is a picture of a human egg. Now, as you know, human egg, with your naked eye, is just a full stop on a piece of paper. And what you see here, this is a human egg that can be magnified 5,000 times. It looks like a tennis ball, yeah? All right? On top, there's all these yellow things here. These are the sperm that bind to the egg. And after that, it goes in and fertilizes the egg. Now, this is the final stage of the embryo, 5-day-old embryo, for the blastocyst before it implants into the egg, into the womb. And these are a specialized embryo, and whereby this block of cells will give rise to the baby. This network of cells will give rise to the placenta and the umbilical cord. Now, of course, you wonder the eggshell here. Why are there so much hair on the eggshell? Now, these are not hair. These they serve a very important purpose, yeah? Because now, when the sperm, let's say this egg here is ovulated and going to the tube here, and the sperm are all deposited here, the egg and the hair-like structures emit chemical signal to let the boys know, hi boys, I'm here. Come over here and swim and towards me and fertilize me. All right? And because it's so dark in there, imagine you're a pilot. Without this, you don't know where to land, So these are also act as landing lights. All right? Okay? So the egg is very marvelous. So the partner beside you is smarter than you. Most of the time. Don't you agree? Now, okay, this is just the diagram to show you how a sperm goes in and fertilizes the egg. Looks very simple. Yeah? All right. So first of all, of course, the sperm will go through a series of cells so that only the best sperm, as you know, can go in and fertilize the egg. Yeah. And the sperm here, the sperm itself, the head, where it's a cap. Imagine these are Olympic swimmers. So the cap, so when it reaches the eggshell, it releases the enzyme, help it drill a tunnel through before going and fertilize the egg. Sound very simple. But then again, there's a lot of problem here. Not all men will have all sperm that have good shape. That's why man produces millions and millions of cells, millions of sperm. All right, so that at least 1% of the sperm population will have this type of morphology, we call it the shape. Yeah. So now let's go back to this one first, the process. Why this is very important here. You should understand why we grow your embryos to a day 5 stage. Now, as I said, this is the ovary, the fallopian tubes. There are 2, the uterus, and then vagina here. As I mentioned, when the egg is ovulated, the egg is sucked into the tube naturally, and the sperm will have to swim all the way here. Yeah. So your sperm, you have millions of them, so they're competing among themselves in marathon race. But not all sperm are good swimmers. Some are very fast, some slow, some don't swim, some just swim in circles and lost their way. So they start off millions and millions of them. By the time they reach the vicinity of the egg, probably the number could be just 30,000 sperm. Because 30,000 sperm is the minimum number of sperm that can fertilize one egg. So let's say fertilization happens in here. Yeah. And after that, the egg is no fertilizer is no more an egg, it becomes an embryo. Yeah. So this little embryo will need to travel down the tube to reach the final destination in the uterus so that it can implant and get food from mommy. So it takes 5 days for the embryo to reach here. So by the time it reaches, and during its journey, it grows and more cells, which I'm going to show you later how embryos look like, the pictures of them. Okay. So by the time it reaches here, it becomes a specialized embryo, like the blastocyst, which I showed you earlier. Now, the question is, what do we do to make it successful? First of all, it's the sperm. All right? Sperm is very important. Now, if you can recall your school days, the teacher will have told you, oh, the job of the sperm is just to fertilize the egg. That's it, finish. Yeah? No. The job of the sperm has a very strong impact on the outcome of the pregnancy. So that's why we need to select the best sperm that gets in. All right? Now, what you see here, these are the human sperm. Okay? So the sperm is made up of the head that contains the male DNA, the genes, and the neck is a powerhouse, and the tail is said to help the sperm to swim towards the egg. Now, this is called a normal shaped sperm. So man produces millions of sperm, so there will be defective sperms. The defects will be the head defects. These are what can never swim fast, can never able to fertilize the egg, because some of this one so heavy, can't reach the egg in time, lose the battle. The neck problem, some have crooked neck, bent neck, and the tail defects. Right? Some of these can't swim, but don't even swim. This double tail, yes, swim very fast, but it's defective. All right. So when you look at the sperm test, when they say you some event assess the sperm, so these are the some minimum parameters that you should meet, the WHO standard. So if your sperm count is less than 15 million, then first of all, of course, there's a problem there. There's a difficulty that your wife or partner can conceiving. So 32% here means percentage of sperm that can move forward. It's a minimum requirement. Vitality means not every sperm will be alive, so minimum should be about 60%, and morphology is 4%. Those the percentage of sperm that have normal shape. Okay. Now, then again, when you do the test, we also look at what you see here. These are common. You submit the sample to early test. They look at it. This is just a quantitative analysis. Just to guide the doctor. Okay, how much sperm you have, how good your sperm are, whether good swimmers or not, and so on and so forth. But to me, we are more interested in the DNA quality of the sperm. because it has a strong impact on the outcome of pregnancy. All right. Now, what do we do? So what happens is that in the lab take a small sample of your sperm, treat them with chemicals to break down the cell membrane so that it can spread out its DNA. So when it spread out, it forms a halo. That's why this test is known as the halo sperm test. So the larger the halo, the better it is. So, and what happens is what you see here, okay, this one shows you that this sperm has good DNA. This one shows you more than 50% of the DNA has been damaged. This one shows you these are the dead sperm, 100% damaged. So what happens in the lab will look at percentage of sperm that have small halo plus percentage of sperm that have no halo to give you an index. So the smaller the percentage, the better it is. This will tell you how good your sperm is. But let me remind you, no matter where you live, let's say you live in Paradise, Shangri-La, Good A, Good Life, whatever, you still have at least 1%, okay? Yeah, because there will be this stuff. Yeah, all right? So what's the impact of this DNA on the sperm, on the outcome? First of all, it gives rise to poor quality embryos. All right, and also, even let's say this embryo managed to reach the blastocyst stage, and a woman implants and get pregnant, yeah, because of the damaged genes contributed by the sperm, the woman stands a high risk of miscarriage in the first 3 months of pregnancy. All right, so we have to look into that. Yeah. So in IVF, we look at selecting the best sperm. All right, to get in. Now, how do we select? Of course, in what I'm sure in the literature or you have come across this. This is how the egg is being fertilized by the sperm. Yeah. Now, this procedure is basically known as intracytoplasmic sperm injection, or ICSI. Simply means injecting one sperm into one egg. Why we do that? Because if you inject one sperm into one egg, you make sure that the sperm is inside the egg, and this sperm will have at least 70% chance of fertilizing this egg. In other words, you have 10 eggs, you get at least 7 embryos. Now, most of the time, it's 100%. Now, these are the other terms that I want to tell you about. These are some medical terms. Oligozoospermia means low sperm, teratozoospermia, and normal sperm morphology, those less than 4%. Actinozoospermia means motility less than 32%. And some of them will have oligoteratoactinozoospermia, very long name. Okay, so if you are a Scrabble fan, you can use this. I'm sure you can use it. Yeah? All right. Now, what we do here, this is routinely done in most IVF centers. Okay, but now I'm not doing this. I'm using this one. All right. The key word is morphologically selected sperm injection, or IMSI. Now, what's the difference between these two? The difference between these two is the selection of the sperm. The selection of sperm is very stringent here. In other words, we look for handsome-looking sperm to get into the egg. Okay, to maximize the chance of you getting a good embryo. Now, how do we do that? Now, what we do is that you see the difference between, on this left-hand side, the difference between ICSI and NC. Yeah? Now, using a very powerful microscope, this is the maximum magnification for ICSI, 400 times. So at 400 times, you don't see the sperm so clearly. So for the embryologist to assume that overall, all this sperm was okay. See 5 days later, what's the outcome? But for us here, to increase our chance of you getting good embryos, what we do is that at 400 times, we get a few of your sperm, line them up, just like beauty contest, and then magnify them to 6,100 or 1,200, so that we can see the details of the sperm. All right? So now, as I mentioned, the sperm head contains your DNA, male DNA. If I see presence of holes, that means that this sperm had badly damaged DNA. It will be rejected. Or even if there's a single hole, it will be rejected. All right? Now, let's say now, this sperm here had no holes at all. Assume there's a good DNA. But the neck has protrusions to that. Not handsome enough. We will reject. Okay? So in other words, why we do that is because we try to minimize the egg to correct the mistakes from the sperm, so that it spends all its resources to produce a good embryo. All right. So if you have all this going in, if the sperm that's very damaged DNA goes in, the egg will spend more time trying to repair the sperm DNA and more resources destined for repairing the DNA of a sperm. This is not good. The resources are meant for embryo development. And these are the other examples of sperm having their DNA damaged. Yeah. So you wonder how all these holes come about. Now, this is a very high magnification of all sperm egg. The dark matters are the DNA material. As you are aware, that we always take in impurities from the environment, from the food, water, and air all the time. So the impurities go to the bloodstream, generate a lot of free oxygen radicals. Now these free oxygen radicals have affinity towards DNA. And when they attack the sperm, they break down the DNA and they create empty spaces in the egg. Like what you see here, number 1, number 2, number 4, show you that these sperm have badly damaged DNA. So when you look from top down, these empty spaces look like sinkholes on the egg. That's how they're being selected out. All right. So what we do is that we select the sperm with high magnification to make sure that we get the best sperm from the sample. Now, the next thing is how we to select a healthy egg. Now, this is how a human egg looks like on the left side when it's ovulated, all right, or retrieved from the follicle. So the egg is surrounded by a lot of cells here. So the main purpose of the cells here is to provide food for the egg to grow and to make sure that the egg can be fertilized by the sperm when it's ovulated. Another function, of course, the cells here act as a barrier to help to select the best sperm to go in and fertilize the egg. Yeah. Excuse me. Now, before we fertilize the egg, we have to remove all the cells so that you can see the egg proper. Now, this is the egg shell. This is the egg proper. This one tells you that this egg is mature. That means it can be fertilized by the sperm. Yeah, and sometimes when the eggs are collected from you, there may be 1 or 2 that are not mature, can't be used. Yeah. Now, excuse me. After the collection, but it's very rare now, we may come across 1 egg or 2 that has very thick eggshell. Now, even though we have the best sperm, good sperm, your sperm have problem penetrating and fertilize this egg. These are the Great Wall of China, very difficult to go in. Yeah. Now, all these eggs have a lot of holes. These are the degrading eggs. This is not good. Or a Mickey Mouse looking egg. Or egg with inclusions like this. So when I come across these eggs, I will not fertilize them because the resultant embryos will be genetically not healthy. But good news is that nowadays it's very rare to find that. All right. Now, in addition to that, since 2020, we have started looking at egg also in a more genetic way. Yeah. Now, when you look at the egg externally, visually, you look at this egg. Oh, this is beautiful. It's good potential. But over here, we are not happy yet. We want to look at the internal structure of the egg. Right. Now, of course, this egg has been treated with chemicals to look at the structure here. But don't worry, when it comes to the real thing, we don't use chemicals. It's not nothing to fertilize, yeah? So what you see here, these are the chromosomes that are retained in the egg. Chromosomes are entities for housing for the genes, yeah? All right, so there are 23 of them in here. So when the sperm comes in, contribute 23, you have 46, all of us have 46 chromosomes. Now, what happens is this. Instead of using chemicals, we use polarized light. That means light going through a series of polarized filters. So what you see here, using a powerful microscope before it's injected, the egg outside looks very nice, but internally, how good it is. So by using a polarized light to shine here, it gives you this. So this gives you exactly the same shape and a good reflection. So this tells me that this egg has good potential to give you a healthy embryo, low risk of miscarriage. Now, this egg here, it looks healthy, but there's some problem here. is between the small cell and the egg. By the way, the small cell is a rubbish bin for the egg. Yeah? It will throw those chromosomes and not put in here. Okay. So in here is between the small cell and the egg. That means that your chromosomes have not been completely separated. So embryo that derived from this egg will be genetically not healthy. Or this egg here looks very beautiful outside, but internally the structure has been broken into pieces. Yeah. So again, embryo that derives from this egg will be genetically not healthy. Because these are the purple strings here, they are responsible for separating the chromosomes for cell division. So if these structures are all damaged, you cannot get genetically good embryos. Yeah. Now, next one is how to grow the embryo after fertilization. Now, this is the 24-hour sequence of embryo development. I'm showing you here. So let's say today we get the eggs, partner contribute the sperm, we do the fertilization. The next day, you'll be updated by the lab. So the lab said, oh, how many eggs fertilized? This is how the fertilized egg looks like. So these are called pronuclei. So one comes from the egg, another one comes from the sperm. Then maximum of 24 hours later, it should reach 48, so on and so forth. This is the endpoints that the embryo should reach at every 24-hour interval. Why we are so particular about this? Because it helps the lab to guide how healthy your embryo is. So let's say if the embryo takes more than 48 hours to reach a 4-cell stage, that means that something is not right in the beginning, because the egg needs to correct a lot of mistakes. And that, because by doing that, it delays reaching the 4-cell stage, take longer. So sometimes it's not so good, yeah? So but if the embryo takes only 40 to 42 hours to reach the 4-cell stage, well, it's good because there's not much for the egg to do, correction. Instead, it can use all its resources and time to produce a good embryo. All right, so these are the stages here. Now what we're going to do here, we're going to grow your embryo in a time-lapse incubator, whereby your embryo is not taken out for the entire 5 to 6 days of development. Because if you were to take out every day and assess the body to check the development of the embryo, you cause stress to them. Because each time you take them out, you bring them out to this environment, they don't like it, then you may not grow to the blastocyst stage, or they may grow to this stage, but the embryo quality is not good. Yeah, but by keeping them in the time-lapse incubator, on top of that, each of them will grow in a well. There's a camera, so the camera will take pictures every 10-minute interval for the entire 5 days, and at the end of it, let's say you get this embryo. So the lab will want to review how this embryo developed from the beginning. So by reviewing you can play. How do I play this one? Play the video. Just use it. By reviewing the video, all right, how the embryo develops, we can give a score to this embryo. So the embryo with the highest score will give you a good chance of getting a good pregnancy. This is how it is. This is the time here. This is how it develops, the embryo. All right. So every one of them must divide into 2 each time. Yeah. The miracle is happening. Then you see now the embryo start to form a cavity and try to close this cavity and expand the cavity. Why? Because it thins out the eggshell, so they can hatch out to implant. So this one forms the baby, and this one forms the placenta. So just remember that every one of us came from this type of embryo. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now this is how the time-lapse incubator looks like. It looks like a starship, yeah, for those sci-fi fans, yeah. The embryos are growing here, but they are monitored here, real time, individual, okay, without taking them out. All right. Now, of course, the laboratory is also very important here. Now, this what you see here. This is a laboratory with ISO certified clean room, whereby the air quality is very, very important. All right. So what you see here, these are the crib that where the embryos are all eggs and embryos are handled inside because it's a controlled environment to minimize stress to them. Fertilization here, and this is the room here where we do the embryo transfer. So the woman here will lie down here, and she get to see the little baby before being loaded into the catheter and put it back. The doctor will put it back into your uterus. All right, and you just lie down there for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then after that, you can discharge and go home. Yeah, one word of advice here is that don't listen to all the busybodies in the forum and blog that advise you, oh, once the embryo is placed inside there, you must lie in before 24 hours. Don't get out of your house or room. My goodness, so stressful. No, do things as per normal. Okay? Now, this is the lab that's how I'll show you here. This is where we process the sperm. This is where we handle. These are the box incubators which we used to grow the embryos. Yeah, until 2019. Now, this is where we store your frozen eggs and embryos in liquid nitrogen or in the secure area. And this chart here, I'm going to show you here, share with you because now this is a very popular chart published in a high impact medical journal, whereby this laboratory tested individual embryo for the genetics content, the health of it. Yeah, they tested thousands of them. And then after that, they bring a chart here. What you see here, the blue line indicates the healthy embryos. The brown one, the unhealthy ones. This is the increasing age of the woman. So this is, as the woman gets older, the chance of her getting healthy embryos drops. All right, even in natural conception, let's say a woman at 45, she has a higher risk of miscarriage because most of her embryos are genetic. Yeah, this is biological. We can't control. Yeah, because when a woman is born, is conceived, she already been given fixed number of eggs, and the eggs are as old as you are now. Yeah, all right. But over here, we try our best to minimize the risk of miscarriage by choosing the egg and choosing the sperm. Yeah. Just for our last slide here, just to let you know our data for the latest one, 2019. The reason why I give you 2019 is because babies conceived in the year 2019, last year were all delivered. So they also can give you what's the probability of you taking home a baby. So the OPU means number of women who came for egg collections. FET means number of women who came back for frozen embryo transfer. We do a lot of frozen embryo transfers because that's where we get good outcome for almost all the patients. Yeah. Now the green bar means clinical pregnancy. Now clinical pregnancy is defined as a pregnancy when you see a fetal heart on your first prenatal scan. Blood test tells you are pregnant, but a few years later you will see doctor first scan. Oh, there's a heartbeat and the sex is confirmed. Yeah. LBR means live birth. What's the chance of you taking home a baby? All right. So these are the age groups here, and these are the outcomes so far. We are very proud of our outcome. Yeah. All right. By the way, the mean age of the woman here is 37. Now, in fact, this year we see more and more women in this age group now, beyond 45, because the government has removed the age limit and no more. And so sometimes we are expected. In fact, we have recently treated one 51-year-old woman. Yeah, yeah, she's pregnant. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Liao, for the very, very eye-opening presentation on the science behind IVF. All right, let us welcome our last speaker for the day, Dr. Yong Cheng To, who will be sharing with you on the critical success factors in IVF. Dr. Yong, please.
Thanks everyone for taking the time and wearing the mask and social distancing, strange audience. For taking the time to come here. I will very quickly go through a topic which I think any couple that is trying for a baby would want to know to see whether what are some of the factors that's important that might help you to have a successful outcome. We know that fertility is defined when you, or infertility is defined when you're trying for more than a year. And if you have been trying for more than a year with regular intercourse and nothing's happening, that's when you should seek some answers. And we know that infertility has important implications, not just to you as a couple, but also to the nation. And I come to tell you that there's a decline in the fertility rate throughout the world, and we see that, oh, it's not mine. It doesn't seem like it's my slides, but I shall go with it. We find that throughout the years, women are actually having lesser children. And there's a study done in Canada, I think, some years back, which found that the prevalence of infertility has increased over time. So it is not that people are getting just more aware and people are doing more tests, but the actual prevalence of infertility has increased. I think you might have gotten the wrong set of slides. These are not mine. But never mind, I would just go through them because we should know what we're talking about. This is a slide to tell us that in certain countries in the world, the fertility rate is still quite robust. And those countries are mainly in the African subcontinent. Whereas in countries like Singapore and Japan, we are actually way below what the replacement rate is. So there's always been a concern with our government and always trying to push people to do something. Yeah, so this is the study that I told you about, that the prevalence of infertility actually increased over that period of time. So why do we think that it is the case? The case is because I think of our lifestyle. Many of us are engaging in smoking, some lifestyle which is fun, but nevertheless sometimes can interfere with the ability to conceive. And also postponement of the first pregnancy. We find that, or rather as IVF doctors, we see that the age of the couple that come to see us, they're gradually getting older as well. As Dr. Liao has told you earlier on, the mean age of the patients that we see is between 37 to 38 years old. So sometimes it's not surprising that we get a 45-year-old lady who comes in and says, I want a baby, I want a baby now. But obviously the age is still the most important prognosticator. IVF has been going on for more than 3 decades. But the good news is that thanks to experts like Dr. Liao and the scientists that is doing all this behind the scenes work. I say behind the scenes because they're actually the more important people when it comes to culturing your embryos and creating beautiful embryos for us to put in. And we can see that the pregnancy rate has improved. And this is what is published, and you can see that Reuters is actually better than some of the many centers that you see. So as I mentioned, maternal age is the most important prognosticator. So regardless of how you look at it, your wife's age is actually the most important thing. A very similar slide that Dr. Liao has shown you, as they say, this is a very famous slide, which reminds us that there is a concurrent where you have a higher rate of terminations or abortions, and with your fertility rate. The cutoff is about 35, but actually the recent studies, if I do ask a question, at what age does your fertility potential start to drop? The answer is not 35. The answer is 28. So it's a big wake-up call. Now, what about men? Now, you see this picture, I'm sorry, it's a whole slide, and I always say I catch them when they're still married, they're not married now. But obviously, the woman is younger than the men. And again, the whole slide, happily divorced, I'm sure. Paternal age still is very important. So as you get over 40 for the men, your sperm essentially gets screwed up. And Dr. Liao has shown you many pictures of the oligoteratosis from here and things like that. Now, at Virtus, we want to say that every patient is different, every patient is an individual. So it's always been the mission statement for this center to treat the couple as individuals. And saying that there's still basic tests that we do. So this has been gone through by the previous speaker. I will not talk anymore about it. Ultrasound scans done by the doctor will tell you whether you have things like this. This is for hydrosalpinges or sausage-shaped fallopian tube. Essentially, the fallopian tube is blocked, it's diseased. And with that being the case, the sperm and the egg will not be able to meet. So this is called a tubal factor. This is how you see it on the scan, on the hysterosalpingogram, and during surgery. What about endometriotic cysts? I'm sure some of you might have visited gynecologists, and then the doctor tell you that, oh, you have a chocolate cyst or an endometriotic cyst. And for the longest time, we removed this endometriotic cyst until we realized that once we do surgery on your ovary, no matter how good the doctor is, your ovarian reserve tends to be compromised. It will be compromised because you remove something from inside the ovary like a cyst, you generally lose eggs along the way. So the current thinking is that unless the cyst is impending rupture or very big or causing problems, you tend to not remove the cyst. The hysterosalpingogram, as I told you, is a test that checks for the tubes and things like this, polyps. Now, polyps are tiny growths inside the uterus. And obviously, if there's something like that growing inside your uterus, your baby is not going to plant or like it very much. So this means that it needs to be removed. And how we remove it is by a procedure called hysteroscopy. Tiny instrument goes in and there's a loop, which is electric current, and we burn it away. And studies have shown that if you remove such polyps, it will be useful, it will improve the implantation. And about fibroids. Again, a very commonly understood term, you go to a gynecologist, they tell you that you have fibroids. The question to couples trying for a baby is that, do you need them to be removed? It very much depends on where they are, the size of the fibroids. And if you find that the fibroid is actually impacting on the cavity, then yes, common sense tells you that you need to be removed. Okay. I suppose some of you here might have gone through fertility treatment or going through fertility treatment, and in your reading and Google around, most of my patients are very knowledgeable. You ask this thing called endometrial scratching. Right. So you go through an IVF cycle and you put in embryos, which are very beautiful, and everyone is expecting a positive result. And then unfortunately it doesn't work. But if you remember the statistics, no matter how good the lab is or your embryo is, there's still a 20-30% chance that it will not stick. And that's when sometimes we have to look inside the uterus. Now, endometrial scratching is a very simple procedure where you actually scratch, as the name implies, the lining of the womb. And by doing so, sometimes it induces new changes. And as the lining regrows, you might improve implantation. It's usually not done as a first line, but usually done when you have embryos that fail to implant. But saying that, I think the evidence is still not 100%. Otherwise, everybody will be doing this. So the concept behind this scratching is like somebody going for a facial. So I'm sure maybe 90% of people here will have done the facial. Okay, not me, but anyway, so you go through and you scratch your face, you wash your face, you get a smoother complexion after that. So it was given to me as an analogy, but okay, so sorry about this thing called IUI, which I'm sure you heard before. And many people walk into the clinic and say, I want an IUI. So SO stands for super ovulation. So essentially, it means that we get the sperm from the husband and we get the experts to wash the sperm. What they do is they spin the sperm to get rid of the non-motile ones and those that are not so handsome, as he said just now. And then we insert the sperm right inside. So there are a few sexy things about this. Number one, we know when your wife is going to ovulate because the doctor will be monitoring to know when she's going to ovulate. so we know the window. The second thing is that we get the experts to watch. So you get all your Superman, all right? You get your Avengers, you get Superman, the strong soldiers, the mobile ones. And then the last thing is that we put that right inside. So by doing that, you reduce the distance that the sperm needs to swim. So these three very sexy things are useful for some couples, not all. All right. First of all, you should be relatively young. So if you're 44 years old, you come in and say, I want to do IUI, we'll probably discourage you because the success rate in that age bracket is very, very slow. And saying that, we always remind our patients that no matter how sexy this IUI sounds to you, the best success rates amounts to no more than 25%. That's provided the sperm is okay and you're young, the tubes are fine. Now, I'm going to very quickly run through IVF. As you know, IVF has improved so much, as you can see, the live birth rates that adoptions are dropping, and the growth of IVF is worldwide. So the number of cases in the world has gone up, shot up tremendously, because I think the stigma of IVF is finally gone. So you can actually go into a kindergarten and one kid talking to another kid and realize that maybe 25% of the kids there may be IVF babies. How do we do the stimulation? Can be complicated, variations, but generally just two formulas. One is a long protocol and one is a short protocol. I won't go into details as it can be very boring. Your doctor will do that with you. But generally, we use the antagonist or the short cycle because it's more patient-friendly. You get the same results, and the number of days of stimulation is lesser. So as doctors, as I said, we try to think and listen to the patients and, of course, provide an individualized treatment. We know patients prefer all these things, and science, together with pharmaceutical companies, has always innovated and has always tried new things. And these are the things that we are doing to make it a more patient-friendly cycle. Well, this is not very friendly because it's very complicated. But I suppose the basis behind it is that we would stimulate your eggs to grow to a certain size, and that takes about 10 to 11 days. And during the 10 to 11 days, you see a doctor for a scan to monitor the rate of growth and the number of follicles. Now, about 10 days later, we tell you and your husband that 2 days later, you have your egg collection. You tell your husband because he's needing to produce the sample on the day of collection. Right? So essentially, simple enough. We tend to do away with a lot of blood tests, which I'm sure many of you have read. The IVF involves a lot of injections, a lot of blood tests. Or generally, science have proven to us that a good ultrasound and a good assessment of the follicles, you don't need too much blood tests. So we try to make it simplified and patient-friendly. The transfer itself, which is quite critical. I mean, the lab has put in a lot of effort to help to create beautiful embryos. So the doctor that's doing it has also put in a lot of effort to make sure it's in the right place with minimal sort of trauma. I'll go through a few slides, which what patients normally ask me. For example, like acupuncture. Is it necessary? Is it useful? The evidence says that it actually doesn't do anything. But if you feel that you find some peace with this placebo sort of poking, then yeah, go ahead. As Dr. Liao has said, bed rest. I have patients who say that I'm going to book sandwiches, I'm going to book 4 seasons for 2 weeks after that. Yeah, by all means, if you got the money. But actually, it doesn't do any difference. You can just carry on your own daily living and exercising as well. So, fresh or frozen? I think the verdict is still out whether you want to do a fresh cycle or a frozen cycle. But this has very good success rates. I think primarily most of us subscribe to the frozen cycle. But I got to sustain that frozen cycles are mainly done for health and safety reasons. Because you produce quite a lot of follicles, you feel very bloated. It might not be good to put in an embryo straight away. If you do get pregnant, you feel worse. All right. But we are assured that by doing a frozen cycle, I do not compromise the success rate. In fact, in some patients doing a frozen cycle, it improves. pregnancy rate. So as I said, jury is still out, fresh or frozen. That's why you have different people writing all these papers to debate whether it's fresh or frozen. I think doing frozen cycles have stood us quite well in terms of getting very good pregnancy rates. Patients also take that time to take a break. So if you do a fresh cycle, you speed on into a pregnancy. Frozen cycle, you take a month break, you get your hormones to come out of your body, you're more relaxed, and then you can start again. But every couple is different, as I said, so you discuss it with your doctor. Some statistics showing that the frozen cycle are just as good. Some studies shows that frozen cycles have better pregnancy rate, especially in the older ones. And long and short of it, single embryo transfer is what we advocate. We do not like twins. We don't mind twins. Twins can be quite troublesome for the caring parents. Preterm labor, premature rupture of labor. You've got twins that have problems as well. So we try to put in a single embryo. So get a baby, but one at a time. So these are some of the slides showing that. I often show this when patients try to insist or try to push to say that I want twins, I like twins, I want to put in two. These are quite alarming data and quite wake up call to tell you that not all twins are, as you see on the road, healthy. Sometimes a bad outcome. British Journal telling you to put in a single embryo, etc. So the take-home message is that you have one embryo put in if it is good. If you have failed before, or if you are slightly more elderly, again discuss with your doctor. Singapore laws allow you to put in two, but we generally promote that you put in a single embryo. So that's my talk, and I'm sure I didn't overrun. Thank you. Happy to take questions from anyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yong, for the very insightful presentation. All right, we are now to our panel Q&A. So may I invite Dr. Yong, Ms. Sharon, as well as Dr. Liao to the front, please, for the panel Q&A.
I think we do very informal. Just stand up, ask questions. We're all in the room, so we don't sit together because it's social distancing. So, but if you have anything at all, just raise your hand. Dr. Liao is walking around, and Sharon's right behind. So just shout the question. More than happy. Yeah.
So we're considering getting the COVID vaccine, but we're wondering if there is any relationship between vaccine and fertility. Does it negatively impact it?
I think the current guidelines is that if you do take the COVID vaccine, wait about a month before you try for a baby. Now, if you're pregnant, no COVID vaccine. Okay? And the third thing is that for guys, try not to catch COVID. It really screw up your sperm.
No,
you can Google.
if that is the case, would it be possible to ask for freezing of egg and sperm because you don't want to take the COVID vaccine?
I don't think the regulations in Singapore allows social egg freezing, number one. If you're married, of course you can freeze embryos. There's a difference. So let's say if you're married, of course, if you say that I want to freeze my embryos because I'm afraid that I'm going to catch COVID or I'm going to go to a vaccination. I think yes, you can do as any married couple come in, do an IVF cycle, freeze your embryos, and then decide when you want to put your embryos in. But if you're a single person and talk about freezing eggs because you ask for eggs, I don't think we can do that. Yeah.
So for the freezing embryo, that can be like a personal choice.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay.
Just a bit. So you as doctors, what is your opinion? Would the vaccination or could the vaccination have an impact on fertility rate in the future?
I don't know the answer to that. I think we are still learning about how effective this vaccine is, the side effects of the vaccine, and also whether it's going to be the answer to COVID. I had my vaccine yesterday, all right? I can't lift my hand with this thing, but I'm still going to go for my second shot. But I'm not sure whether this immunity that we claim, all right, is going to last me more than 3 months. And so I don't know the answer to your question. And I don't think anyone does. For example, like COVID, I mentioned about the sperm thing because I actually had a patient who had rubbish sperm. And when you ask him, he does nothing. He's a sportsman, he's a lawyer, and he's healthy living, but he caught COVID in April. And that was the only thing. And before that, he told me he was okay. And you Google COVID and sperm, there is a relationship. I'm not saying everybody who catch COVID may have that. We are still in the flux here, as you know.
Any other questions? No questions?
Yes.
Let's ask about the IUI, like anything less than 25, is it for the male or the female or both?
35 years old for the female, but again, that is not a criteria that's set in stone. So let's say if you are 37, 38, you come in, you talk to your doctor, and then you find that you have good ovarian reserve, you are healthy, sperm is very good, and tubes are fine, and your religion doesn't allow you to do IVF, it might be okay to try a few cycles of IUI. So again, it's very individualized. But what I put less than 35 is because your best success comes from less than 35 in a treatment modality that is not screaming out 50%, 60% success rate.
Other questions? Okay, I think it's not working. Okay, since there are currently no other questions on the ground, perhaps I can pose a question. Okay, just wanted to check, maybe all of you might be interested in knowing why is it that doing frozen embryo transfer at Fertility Center will lead to a higher success rate in terms of clinical pregnancy and life birth rate as compared to a fresh embryo transfer. Maybe Dr. Leong?
I think Dr. Yong has already explained that just now earlier on. Yeah, maybe Dr. Yong.
Well, I think we work in partnership. You must be confident that your lab can do good freezing before you actually think about using freezing as a way to optimize your success rate. So the people that you work with can culture the embryos into blastocysts. Blastocysts is day 5. As you know, day 5 embryos give you a better pregnancy rate. So you're putting on day 5 and putting day 3 embryo. I can close my eye and say that the person on day 5 is more likely, not 100%, but more likely to have been pregnant. Again, it's no magic formula because if you think about it, if your embryo has been surviving 2 extra days, it's probably stronger. Okay, so that's one part. The second part is the freezing technology. Dr. Liao is probably the expert in that to tell you that the technology we use now is probably not the technology that we used 20 years ago. At the time, there was this thing called slow freezing. Vitrification is what I believe all labs use now. Vitrification is like, we learned it from the fishermen. You go out to the sea, you catch the fresh fish, you throw it into the ice. So it's an abrupt, quick, immediate freezing of your fish. In this case, these embryos is sperm. And when you thaw them, you find that the survival rate of these embryos is much better than the slow freezing technology which you had before. So again, it's science. It's improvements in technology that allow us to use this to give the patient a better outcome. Now, from the doctor side of it, now health and safety, as I said. Now, if you produce 25 eggs, I'm happy because I've got a lot to work with. Remember that IVF is basically a numbers game. If I don't have the numbers from you guys in terms of the number of eggs, no matter how good Dr. Liao is, it's not good. Can't do anything with no ingredients. Likewise for the sperm. That's why some doctors will say, come on, you got to take your supplements, you got to stop drinking, you got to stop smoking, because it makes a difference to the quantity and quality of materials that you give the scientists. Now, having done that, if you have a lot of eggs, you have a lot of symptoms, and that is called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. If you catch that, it can lead to hospitalization. If not, you can try to put embryos back in, but you have a lot of hormones that are surging in you. And all these are supra-physiological hormones. Every month, you produce one egg naturally. God made it that way. But as doctors, we are pushing you to produce 15. So you think about it in the logical sense, a lot of hormones going into you. So you want that hormones to come out of your body first, and then prepare you with better control. If there's no other surging hormones in you, most of us who can do a frozen cycle that's medicated, that's natural, that's semi-regulated, and all these things. So that we create the best environment for the embryo that's properly stored, frozen, and thawed to put inside you. And hence, I think that contributes to the success rate. Now, another intangible thing is the counselor. They'll tell you that when you go through an IVF cycle, it's an emotional roller coaster. So if I do a fresh cycle, everything's crammed in the 2 weeks. I have to get everything done. I have a lot of expectations. But if you push it over a period of time, it gives you a bit of time to rest mentally and emotionally. When you come back again, you're recharged. And that might help. Again, I say this is intangible. This is my take on it.
Can you typically how many injections are required in the IVF process?
As I mentioned just now, you probably have about 10 days to 11 days of injections. So the type of injections, there was a busy slide just now. Again, you discuss with your doctor. Pharmaceutical companies have tried to simplify things by saying, I can give you a single injection for 5-6 days, you don't need another injection. And that's called Elonva. But somehow it's fallen out of favor because we cannot control. So doctors also like to control. They're control freaks sometimes. They want to make sure that you're doing it. So we, you want to say something? Yeah. So in terms of the number of injections that you are mentioning, about 10 to 12 days, and it's a daily injection. Number of injections from day 6 usually there are 2. So altogether about 10 to 12 days. And we usually teach the husband wonderful bonding time. although you can get scolded, you can get screamed at, and then the doctor will come in and say, so it's okay, other people are saying, yeah, then got bruising, so perhaps to is this normal? But usually get the husband involved.
Wanted to add up to young. I think about 70-80% of the couples I see when the husbands deliver the injection, like if you want to kind of feel part of the wife. But I was just going to mention that a lot of the couples I see when they first come to us, they're very scared of injections, and they have this very old-fashioned idea of like one flew over the cuckoo's nest, with the big syringe and needle and stuff. So it might be worth you just explaining to them what it's actually like, because it's not that scary. It's not like you're scratching with a big syringe and old-fashioned needle.
Well, it's not this size, though. For sure. It's not this size. The needle is extremely tiny, and you actually don't feel it. I cannot say that. You feel it, you feel very little of it. It's like the same syringe that people use for diabetic.
It's like a
Syringe. Yeah. So it comes in a pen as well. So it's actually quite idiot-proof. But then there are a lot of idiots too. So okay. Anything else?
I'd like to add regarding the frozen embryos. Now, Dr. Young mentioned about vitrification, which is the latest one, meaning there are 2 types of freezing embryos. The older one is for slow freezing, where you use a freezing machine to freeze the embryo. That takes about 1.5 hours to freeze the embryo. To bring down the embryo, because we freeze the embryos in liquid nitrogen. So from room temperature to liquid nitrogen temperature is minus 196 degrees Celsius. So now, there's a step down every 1 minute, 1 degree. So whatever water that's present in the embryo has already become ice inside, and this will kill the embryo. That's why the slow old method is not good. When you thaw the embryo, 50% or less will not survive. Yeah, 50% or less will survive. But when latest one is vitrification, means it's called super fast freezing, whereby there's no ice form at all. Yeah, you just dehydrate the embryo. In the last minute, it's done by a highly skilled embryologist. It's plunged directly into the blanket, very fast. So whatever water that remains will not become ice. So it becomes a state like called a vitreous state. It's neither solid nor liquid in the vitreous state. So the embryo becomes transparent. Yeah. So when you take out the embryo, we don't use the word cold, we use the warm. Because the embryo warm, hydrated, so the survival rate is at least 95%. In fact, most of the time it's 100%. Right? You can't claim 100% of the time because if not, the ministry will say, why you claim 100%? Okay, a 5% error. 95% is less than 100%. All right? So another thing is that once the embryos are frozen, they are frozen in time at your age now. In ours, they're in the state of hibernation, they cannot go, they won't get any older. So let's say you have 5 or 6 embryos at this age now. And then let's say Dr. Young put in one, you have a healthy baby born. 2 years later, you want to plan for the second child. Your embryo is still at this age. Yeah. So when in the 40s, let's say when you started your freezing embryo at 30, when you're 40, you want to have more children, depending on your husband, how many children he wants, maybe a football team. So you have to discuss with him. All right. And freezing embryos, as Dr. Young said, you can also manage your time. It doesn't mean that next month after a collection, you must do the transfer. So let's say this period, most of the ladies are very busy ladies now. So let's say we are very busy with these few months, you can postpone it until you get leave or plan for holiday, you come back for holiday and put it in. Yeah. So now it helps you to manage when you want to get pregnant. Right? As Sharon has shared, your mind and the body must be ready to get pregnant. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions from the ground? All right. If not, thank you so much, Dr. Yong, Dr. Liao,
Thank you,
and
everyone.
Sharon. Okay. So before we end this session, right? Just wanted to quickly share with you that for those of you who have not undergone any fertility checks before, you might wish to consider going for our couples fertility assessment at the Fertility Center. All right, just reach out to us, okay, via email or just contact us at our main line, and we'll be glad to actually arrange for an appointment for you and your spouse. Okay, so the price is actually $309 before GST. Okay, and yeah. That's all. So thank you so much for joining us today. We will actually be sending you an email early next week for a feedback with regards to today's session. So please check your mailbox accordingly. And for those of you who actually drive today, you may actually get a coupon from my colleague outside. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay. Thank you.